My name is Mike McGrath. I'm an engineer. I design, build, and operate treatment plants and on-site wastewater systems. I also started about 9 years ago a little company called Roundtable Operating Solutions that makes an organic carbon for denitrification. I'm not employed with them or connected by them, but there's been substantial advancements on Cape Cod that some of you may not know about. I have part of my on-site residential system. I started out very early in the program, and I was plagued by what they would call non-conformities. I have altered the design 3 times, 4 times now. The 3rd time, I took all the wastewater and passed it through a special filter called a rock filter. So I was the only technology that didn't have recirculation. And I found that the total nitrogen was 80 parts per million was my average. I also have done a shared system, and I find that my total nitrogen in the shared system, the raw wastewater, is 75 parts per million. I did a nitrogen offset program for a project that was abandoned. And what that meant was I was next to an estuary, and I had to remove more nitrogen than what I was going to discharge. So I went and measured the actual total nitrogen that was being discharged at a commercial building. And I think it was 185% greater than the nitrogen that was assigned it in the meat model. So my advice to the town has been consistent. Go out and measure the actual total nitrogen in the wastewater before you connect to the sewer. They have taken nitrogen loadings from an old formula that was derived from basically municipal wastewater numbers. So they have calculated the nitrogen input from houses as if it was coming from, it's the same value as discharge at a wastewater treatment plant. Well, we've already talked about infiltration and exfiltration. In other words, the sewer pipes leak, so the water's diluted. There's also miles of sewers, and anybody that knows sewers, that the water inside goes up and down. So there's opportunities for some treatment, not significant amount. But what happens near the coast is we have pretty concentrated plumes of nitrogen. We can actually remove a lot of nitrogen if we just measured it beforehand. My attitude is they have given us numbers. We can calculate how many kilograms per year we need to remove, and I'll tell you what, you will not have to sewer as much as they say. The other thing that they have, or what mankind has at the moment, is sort of a profound misunderstanding about how nitrogen moves through the groundwater. And I have a patent pending that basically says if you go to a wastewater treatment plant and add carbon back to the final effluent, you will get attenuation in the groundwater, and I did so. I did find it. The soil bacteria there, they will actually do, remove some nitrogen. I didn't remove it all, but I got a significant amount.
Like a few other people talk, in
So,
general, I'm hearing.
All I'm saying is that we need to start by measuring actual nitrogen.
Thanks. I just wanted to mention something about financing, and it isn't often brought up. I'm not a legal scholar, but if you look in the Massachusetts General Laws in Chapter 111, Section 127.5B, you'll find that that there are betterments are permitted for the upgrading, replacement, or repair of septic systems. So if that means that this revolving fund, a possibility can be applied for that kind of thing, and that can help the financing very well, because it's in the law, it's there, and it just isn't used much, but it's there. So I would suggest that as we progress in Falmouth with these on-site systems, this is something to look at.
There could be money there.
Yeah.
Most state agencies, even in New England, they're not counting decentralized systems for SRF funding, and that's a huge complication another part of all that is you have to get on the state's intended use list, basically, for what amount of money would be needed. Right now, DEP does not actually put in numbers in the last several, they haven't put in numbers in terms of how much could be available, because they're using all the money on larger pipe systems right now. You need to be able to quantify it state by state and get in that information to a national database to begin getting recognition in order to get these kinds of funds.
Right.
My name is Skip McCormick, and I'm heartened by what Leo said about we having until 2015 to show progress on these alternatives that the green alternatives that we're working on. And I fully support going down that road and looking at those. But I still worry a little bit that at some point in time, the regulators will say, well, that's all fine and good what you've implemented, but it still doesn't meet regulatory standards, and you have to take measures above and beyond what you've already done to solve the regulatory problem, and/or that we're not going to allow you 10 years to show progress. You know, you've only got a finite amount of time to show that you can solve the problem with these green choices, and/or that someone like Conservation Law Foundation or Coalition for Buzzards Bay comes around and says, you might have a great deal with the regulators, but we're not satisfied, and we're going to go to court and make you do something you might not want to do.
If we can get away from cost avoidance, the permit is kind of, we're getting as close to the permit as we can at the lowest cost philosophy, then a lot of those problems start to solve themselves. If you get into a place where these things have value and private companies are trying to extract as much of that value as they can, they're not going to leave any money sitting on the table, and you're probably going to find yourself with far less nitrogen than you ever thought possible, because people will find a way to squeeze every drop out because it's worth something.
You might not have enough rod for you.
The other thing I would point out is that I've talked privately with people, and we've touched on it today. There is a market out there for risk, an actual financial market. It's what got us into a lot of the financial mess we're in now, is because the market for risk was a little bigger than it should have been.
Different kinds of assets.
But there are people in Wall Street and other places like Wall Street who just buy and sell risk all day, and if there's some risk you're worried about, you can assign a price to that risk and protect yourself.
From whatever the natural bivalve in this area is the best to use from your culture point of view, let's just assume it's an oyster, that's fine. Why I asked my question before was, what are you going to use the oyster flesh for? There's quite a large program being developed through the Agriculture University in Uppsala in Sweden, exactly on this process in the Baltic, which is another eutrophied water body, where they're actively now farming oysters, and the pulp, if you like, the flesh is ground up and used as pig feed, or swine feed as you call it here. And it's helping, basically that's offsetting the highest cost component, which is high quality protein in pig feed. And so it's really a good substitute there, and it's considered healthy and safe, having been heat processed to get rid of any pathogen issues. So there's another financial opportunity that people will be fighting over your oysters, not for human consumption, but maybe as animal feed, and it's a good quality source material. As, by the way, are worms, and so here we could start thinking of municipal worm culture in the sense of another way of dealing with worm protein is the highest quality protein. It's better than fish protein in that sense, in the sense of the amino acid balance in it. So there are these other resources we could generate through utilization of these residuals. That's the point.
I'm still having a really hard time hearing about how to get rid of nitrogen. We have to capture nitrogen and use the nitrogen, and I just can't believe that after all these talks we still hear about how to get rid of nitrogen, how to, whatever you want to do with it, and get rid of it. And so I just want to emphasize, whatever we do, we're going to have to capture it, because this world is getting extremely full. And the only way we can grow food is when we capture nitrogen and phosphorus. And we can no longer afford to not do it.
So I'm not going to try to summarize the whole day.
Have a go.
do want to pick up one really strand that really resonated with me in what Hilda said earlier about the timing of when you get reductions, and it also was implicit in some of the things you were saying, Ron, about aquaculture and what it takes to launch it. So and it helps to address the concerns about, well, what if people think this isn't enough or isn't fast enough? And some of the concerns that are often expressed about using greener approaches that don't have quite the track record is it's a recipe for delay, it's an excuse not to spend money, and to the extent there are things that are in fact real opportunities to get reductions faster, that's a really important thing to focus on. And so I guess if I were giving advice to the committee in Falmouth, the things where you can achieve reductions faster than any infrastructure project are really, really valuable in getting that end result approvable by regulators, but maybe even more important, acceptable to the community, acceptable to the environmental community. Again, those are the best ways to address this problem quickly, which it needs to be addressed quickly. So making those things real, finding ways to spell out how they're going to be implemented, create some certainty about how they'll be managed. It's not just we're going to encourage people who are interested to do these. We actually have a program. Here's the funding. Here's how we're going to make it work and maintain it. That's a really important place to focus.
You need to have that advocate, a responsible management entity. Who's going to be serving that capacity? Somebody does have to present the arguments, has to present the data, has to pull together the scientific information, has to pull together the financial information, and pull all that together.
In a plan.
In a plan, with a responsible management agency, whether or not you go through the legislature to do that, whether or not you have other means. Town DPW was here earlier, since I'm like an interesting gentleman to lead that kind of cause. But that's what you're going to have to do, is to find somebody who can represent that aspect.
So we've reached the end, and I want to thank everybody for coming. I think those of us from outside continue to be really impressed with Falmouth, the value system, the energy, the innovation, and the creativity. We also recognize that there are huge opportunities. It's complicated. Ultimately, Falmouth has to lead with all the help that you can get.